One of the greatest challenges for any insurance producer is to choose a niche that works for them. Everybody talks about it. Everybody acknowledges that the way to success is to be the one best producer in what you do, the obvious choice. But how you get there is a totally different animal and very difficult. And so, what I'm going to do is walk through a framework with you on how to choose a niche so that you can take it home and apply it to your life. So, let me go through my 4 question framework. First, do you have enough target prospects in your region? Two, does your agency have a competitive advantage in this industry? Three, does your agency have the right products to win? Four, do you personally bring a competitive advantage to the space? And I'm going to dig into each of these and talk about it in more detail. So, the first one is, are there enough prospects in your region? You know, you may have the absolute best product for circuses, and you may have a great emotional resonance for circuses because you grew up in a family of clowns. But if there are no circuses to insure in your territory, it doesn't matter if you're really good at insuring circuses. It's just not going to help you get where you need to go. So, one of the things you have to analyze is how many businesses are there in your area? How much revenue that do they generate on average? And does that add up to enough revenue over the long term that you're going to be able to make a living on it? When you're investing in businesses in the stock market, they talk about this concept as total addressable market. It's the idea that if you could write every single one of these, or if you could take every single dollar of revenue in this marketplace, what would that marketplace look like? And it's different for every company. So for Apple, the total addressable market is huge. For CrowdStrike, it's huge. But for you and I, if we're talking about our total addressable market, if I'm saying, man, I wish I could write every plumber in Frederick County, that's tiny in compared to Apple. Now, you and I don't need to be Apple. We just need to have enough prospects to get to $1 million of revenue. But the problem is, if you're looking at your total addressable market and you're saying, well, I need to write $1 million of revenue, and your total addressable market maybe has $500,000 of revenue total, you're not going to get where you need to go. So you need to have a marketplace big enough to pull from that it's going to work for you. And every geography is different, right? So I'm in Maryland. We don't have a whole lot of oil and gas in Maryland. It would not do me any good to have a high level of proficiency of in oil and gas. But if you're in Texas or Oklahoma, that may be a totally different story. So that's where choosing the right industry to work on makes a big difference for what you're going to do. And even if you're going to stay in one vertical, like I can tell you within the health and human services range, there's a big difference between home health care and group homes. One of those is typically a lot larger than the other. So it behooves me to focus on one more than the other. So that's the way you've got to think about it. There's got to be enough prospects that generate enough revenue that are going to help you get to your total revenue goal over the long term. Think about the end. Think about where you're trying to get to. Because if you get too far down one track, I'm going to tell you, it's really, really hard to course correct once you are a couple years into a project. If you get a couple years down the road into health and human services and you realize the way to go is construction, well, it's good that you know insurance for health and human services, but you don't have any brand recognition for construction. It's really hard to jump. That's the way it goes. So you have to make sure that from the very beginning, you at least have a thought on what's going to make sense, that there's going to be a marketplace large enough to support you. Ideally, you want at least 1,200 prospects. I'm stealing that idea from Charles Speck. Thank you, Charles. You put that on a podcast a long time ago, and it's always made sense to me. 100x dates a month, because there has to be a large enough number of people for you to talk to, because only about 3% of buyers are going to want to talk to you, are going to be in the process of buying what you have to sell, which means you have to have a long enough list that you are talking to enough people that the numbers are going to work in your favor. So there has to be a large number of these prospects, and they have to be large enough that you're going to have enough of a total addressable market to pull on in order to hit your revenue goals. And so, with that aside, that I think it's a totally different topic on how you build lists and how you answer those questions. But the next thing you got to think about is, does your agency have a competitive advantage to win in this industry? This is a really important question, because let's say you want to go after plumbing contractors, and that's great. You want to go after plumbing contractors. There's a lot of them. They're large, fantastic. It's got the right marketplace. But you walk in there and say your competitor down the street will do in-person OSHA training and your agency will not. It's going to be hard for you to position yourself as the obvious choice in that space. And there's only so much you can do as one individual person in order to break into a space. What is really going to be helpful for you is if you can be carried a little bit by the brand of your agency and the reputation of your agency. Not that that's going to close the door for you, but I will tell you it will help open doors. It will help you get in places if there is some type of brand and reputation within your target market that says, oh, yes, you need to talk to these people because they helped me and they helped three of my friends. That's going to crack open a lot of doors. And once you get there, there has to be some type of competitive advantage. If you're working with subcontractors and they rely on really fast certificate requests, but your agency doesn't have the infrastructure to pull that off, that's going to be a really hard sell. It's going to be really hard for you to build. And so, whichever industry you're working with, there has to be that infrastructure behind you to support you. If you're working with human service organizations, the people in the office need to understand abuse controls and quality control and the things that go on in that environment so that they can support you in that process. So, whatever it is, whatever space you have, in whatever space you choose to go into, your agency has to have some type of competitive advantage that makes them compelling. It makes them appealing, which kind of segues into the next part. Your agency has to have the right products to win. If they don't have the right company contracts, it may be a huge marketplace. Maybe they have some great value added services, but if they don't have the right contracts, you ain't winning. It's not going to go very far. If you want to go after plumbing contractors and you get into it and you realize that there is one top dog that insures almost all the plumbing contractors and you don't have that top dog, you're sunk. Absolutely sunk. And it's not worth spending much time in that marketplace. That's a dead niche to you. There are some spaces out there that are like this. I have a lot of experience in the church space where there are a couple of top dogs with very limited distribution. And if you do not have one of the top dogs, it's not worth spending a lot of time in the space, because those top dogs will eat your lunch and they will never give you a contract, which means it's important to find a different niche. That's what that means. And there are other spaces out there like that with exclusive products and limited distribution. And if you don't have it, you're never going to make headway in that niche. So you have to be able to walk into a space, yet walk into an organization and say, yes, I control 90% of the marketplace that you need to access as an organization. If you work with me, I'm going to help you access the marketplace that you need. You are going to be satisfied. You do not need anybody else. That's the level of gravitas that you need to have. So my rule of thumb on this is that I need to have confidence that at least 90 to 95% of the time in a space, I've got the right product to win in order for me to want to spend in any amount of time in that space. Because once you get into a sales process, there are 1,000 ways the deal goes sideways and it just doesn't work out for you. and it's all interpersonal. So the last thing, the worst thing that can happen to you is you spend all this time working on a deal only to find out at the very end you didn't even have the right products to win. That's a lot of time sunk, and it's something that you don't control. So, as much as anything, what I found is super important in this process is eliminate the barriers that you cannot control as much as possible. Make it so that as you're going through the sales process, if you're going to lose for reasons that you control. If you can't control what your underwriters are going to offer, at least make sure you're talking to all the underwriters that have the right products to win. Narrow down the whole process to, did I work the sales process correctly? Did I qualify them correctly? Did I get things done in a timely fashion? Did I execute on my strategy? Because if you can make it that simple, where as long as I execute on my strategy, I know I'm going to win, all the other factors that can be incredibly frustrating as a producer, they just go away. They really do. Like, if you know you have all the right products, there's no concerns about whether or not you're going to have the right product. If you know that you have the right agency support to win the deal, if you get in there, there's no concerns about that. If you know you've got a large enough marketplace to go after, that you're always going to be fed, that's there's no concerns there. But when you have those lingering questions about each of those spots, it slows you down. It makes you unwilling to cold call. It makes you worried when you take a first appointment. It makes you worried as you're going through the sales process. And that is all a drag. It's like being in a sailboat and the wind is in your face, and it will wear you out. It's tiresome. You just need to do the groundwork, and you can't do it all at once. And some of it you learn over time, but as much as possible, eliminate all those things that are headwinds for you, that are going to give you fear in an appointment. You want to have no concerns about whether or not you've got the right product. So, one of the challenges is that we're all in different agencies, right? And some of our agencies have different expertises, and some of them have no expertise, some of them have no advantages. And you have to make some business decisions about whether you're in the right agency, or maybe it just needs to be cultivated a little bit. Or maybe they do have a competitive advantage and they do have the right products in the space, but they don't know how to articulate it yet. But you got to figure out how to make that work within your own particular environment. So if you can get those first three questions lined up, then the fourth thing is, do you personally bring a competitive advantage? And so I'll tell you what I've seen in Bittner Henry is that the agency has a virtually exclusive product for churches. And there is a strong culture, a strong Christian culture for serving churches. And so the type of people that it attracts, that the agency attracts for that particular product, are people that have a lot of experience in the church. And when all those factors start to ring and work together, wow, it's really, really powerful. And it's very, very compelling for a prospect that says, wow, it's an agency with that many prospects, with a culture for me, with the right support team, with a person that is geared towards, that is personally compelled to work with me. Wow, that is really, really powerful for a buyer. But that can work with any industry. It can be an agency that said, we are incredibly passionate about real estate. We developed this product set for real estate, and maybe you used to be a property manager and you understand that space inside and out. Well, I'm telling you, when all those factors start to come together, it's really starts to feel like the the one obvious answer for a prospect. I've seen it with group homes for the intellectually and developmentally disabled, where there is one broker that used to be a CFO. at service providers for the intellectually and developmentally disabled. And so his customers will look at me and say, hey, man, he's one of us. I get a lot out of that guy, and his agency has products uniquely for us. I'm glad that you're good at it, but that's not something that we need right now. But that's something that you can work on in yourself. So there's a couple different ways that you can find spaces that you are personally passionate about. Now, don't confuse passion with the only way to do this, because I'll tell you that it's awesome to win, and you can become passionate about anything if you're awesome at it. So you don't need to be passionate about something on the front end in order for it to be your passion in the long term. That's not the thing. The thing is, if you have some type of unique knowledge, maybe you worked in the industry before, maybe you volunteered in the space, maybe you have family ties to the industry. I've heard that a couple of times where someone says, "Well, yeah, my grandfather was a contractor, was a masonry contractor," or something where you're genuinely passionate. That's another way that you can go into it in choosing a space where you have a personal competitive advantage. But the idea is that I would not start there for where you choose your niche, because there may not be enough of a marketplace to support you, and your agency may not have the infrastructure to support you. But once you've figured out where there's enough of a marketplace and where your agency can win, figure out where you can bring your extra special sauce to the equation that's really going to make everything stand out. Because you can't go sign contracts with insurance companies. You, for the most part, can't cultivate that. You probably can't hire people. You can't change the culture within the agency. You can only work with the formula that's been presented to you in that regard. However, if there is something inside what that agency does where you say, wow, there's this one specific thing where I really feel a close tie to, well, you should follow that. That's important. It may be you work in an agency where they work with a lot of social services, but you say, hey, look, I have a unique affinity for service providers to the intellectually and developmentally disabled because my brother was autistic, or I had a family member who was autistic, or had cerebral palsy. I see how it impacts the family. I know I lived that. I know how to talk to that. Well, that's a niche. You need to follow that. You're going to have a personal story to add on top of the business story that's going to make you an obvious choice to your prospect base. And those are the four things that's the framework that I've used to select the niches that I work in. And I can tell you that when I stray outside of that framework, stray outside of where the agency has a unique product offering or a business case to present or a brand and recognition, or maybe there's just not even enough prospects to work, my success rate goes way down, way, way, way down. But when I stay inside of those frameworks, or when I recognize that it could be there, it gives me an idea of where I could build. That's the other way to think about this is maybe it doesn't exist now from an infrastructure perspective, but if you recognize the marketplace and you have the products, maybe you don't have the whole equation just yet, but you've got most of it, you can recognize where you can build. All right. Man, thanks so much for listening. If this was helpful, hit like and subscribe. If you got other questions for me, drop them in the comments. Send me a message on LinkedIn. I love hearing from you. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know. If you want to contact me, my contact information is at insuranceforontrepreneurs.net. Thank you so much for listening. Please go build something great.